the best argument for the existence of God?
Well, the best evidence for the existence of God is that without God, you couldn't prove that anything existed. You couldn't prove anything at all, in fact. Now, there are many lines of evidence that people sometimes use to demonstrate the existence of God, or at least to confirm the existence of God, and I don't want to minimize any of those. Certainly, it's the case that the intricacies of a living cell certainly confirm God's existence. The majesty of the solar system confirms God's existence. Even the effects of God in people's lives certainly are confirmation of God's existence. But it turns out that most arguments that people use for the existence of God are not 100% conclusive. And so it seems to me that the most powerful argument for God's existence is that apart from Him, we couldn't prove anything at all. You see, in order to prove things, we need laws of logic. What are laws of logic? Laws of logic are the chain of reasoning that we use, the correct chain of reasoning, to come to various conclusions from certain premises, certain givens. And you see, we all know about laws of logic, and we use them every day. Even if we can't recite them, we all know them instinctively. You can't have A and not A at the same time in the same relationship, what we call the law of non-contradiction. Now, everyone uses that principle. It's very commonly known. And yet, you see that these laws of logic would not make sense in an atheistic universe. Why would we have these laws at all without a lawgiver? Why would the universe feel compelled to obey laws of logic if there's no God who's upholding the universe? You see, laws of logic in the Christian worldview make sense. They're a reflection of the way God thinks. And so we have these laws of logic that apply everywhere. They're universal. They don't change with time. And that makes sense because God, you see, upholds the entire universe everywhere, and God does not change with time. And so that is reflected in the way He thinks about things. And we can, in a sense, think like God, not completely, of course, but we can think in a way that is consistent with His nature because we are made in the image of God. And so we have access to these laws of logic by which we reason. Laws of nature would be another example of something that only makes sense if you take God's existence as something that is factually true. Why would we have laws of nature that the universe feels compelled to obey? Why do these laws have mathematical properties to them like E equals mc squared and F equals ma? Why is it they can be described by these simple equations that the human mind can understand? Well, that makes sense in the biblical worldview where God has imposed a certain amount of order on the universe. God has made our minds, and He upholds the universe in a logical way that we can understand. Laws of morality would be another example of something that really doesn't make any sense in an evolutionary atheistic universe. Why is it that we ought to behave in a certain fashion if we're just evolved animals, if the universe is just an accident? Why not make up our own laws? And of course, some people do that, and they go to jail for making up some laws that perhaps other people would say are not so good. After all, somebody might think that it's okay for him to kill someone else, but that doesn't really make it right, does it? Not at all. You see, in the Christian worldview, laws of morality make sense because, after all, there is a God who made us in His image, and we're responsible to that God for our actions. And so morality stems from a Christian worldview. It makes sense in light of the biblical God. In a way, the existence of God is the easiest thing in the world to prove because, you see, it's something that everyone already knows. The Bible tells us in Romans 1 that everyone knows in his heart of hearts the biblical God because God has made Himself manifest to everyone. God has shown Himself to everyone in the creation, in our conscience, and so on. And so we don't have to go around and try to come up with some new argument. No, people already know God. That's not the problem. The problem is not that people don't have enough evidence for God's existence. The problem, according to Scripture, is that people suppress that truth in unrighteousness. That's what Romans 1 tells us. What is known of God is made manifest in them. God has showed it to them, and yet they suppress that truth in unrighteousness because they don't want to believe in a God who is rightly angry at them for their sin, for their rebellion against Him. And so you see, what our job is to show people that they're being inconsistent. On the one hand, they're relying upon things like logic and science and morality, things that only make sense in the Christian worldview, while simultaneously denying the God that makes that worldview possible.